by 1824, Andrew Jackson had become a national hero for two reasons. Give me one. Joe, what's one reason he became a national hero?
He acquired Florida.
More than that. Give him a little more credit. Yes.
Battle of New Orleans.
Battle of New Orleans, certainly, which in people's minds ended the War of 1812. But Joe, not only did he fight the Seminoles, he was a great Indian fighter, very victorious general in the Indian Wars. So because of his successes in both the Indian Wars and the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812, he was a national hero. Everybody really admired him. And many of Jackson's followers, because of his great following in the country, thought he should run for president of the United States. And after thinking about it for a period of time, and thinking about the corruption that he saw in Washington, he decided to make a move at the presidency in 1824. So that really takes us to that election, the election of 1824. Now, remember, kiddos, that the Federalist Party isn't even in function. In the last election of 1820, James Monroe ran unopposed. Well, there were no other Republicans that were really interested in the presidency at that time. However, in this election, there were 4 Republicans who were interested in becoming president of the United States. So what you're going to do, instead of having Republicans versus Federalists, you're going to have Republicans versus Republicans. Okay? And it's going to be the same procedure. They're going to look at popular vote and electoral vote, and the whole procedure is going to be the same. The only thing weird about it is you're going to have 4 Republicans. Now, let's try to do a little better than the other class and try to guess on who these 4 were. We've talked about them all. Nobody on the ID sheet. We've talked about all of these particular individuals. So who do you think, anybody, would be one of these 4 candidates? Obviously, we know that Andrew Jackson from Tennessee is going to be one, right? Because we're talking about that. But who are the other 3? Anybody have an idea on somebody we've already talked about? No, not James Monroe. That's a good guess. He decides he wants no more. What? No, good guess. 2 of these were very influential members of Monroe's cabinet that we talked about. And one's going to end up being president. We know that Andrew Jackson's not going to be the 6th president. So who's this fellow right here? John Quincy Adams. So one of the candidates is going to be John Quincy Adams from Massachusetts, Andrew Jackson from Tennessee. How about a couple others that were influential people? One was a member of the famous 3, the other one was in Monroe's cabinet. What? Henry Clay, very good, from Kentucky. Henry Clay from Kentucky is the 3rd candidate, and I'll give you the 4th one. He served in Monroe's cabinet, William H. Crawford from Georgia. So the 4 Republicans that are going to try to win the presidency in 1824 are John Quincy Adams from Massachusetts, William H. Crawford from Georgia, Henry Clay from Kentucky, and Andrew Jackson from Tennessee. So let's start this election results with the popular votes. Now, we know that popular votes don't mean anything. We should really know that after our last presidential election. So we know that electoral votes is going to elect, but let's just talk about the popular vote here. In 4th place, with 46,979 votes, 46,979 votes was William H. Crawford. So in 4th place, with 46,979 votes, was William H. Crawford. In 3rd place, with 47,217 votes, 47,217 votes was Henry Clay. 47,217 votes, Henry Clay. In 2nd place, with 114,023 was John Quincy Adams. And the top vote getter in the popular vote with 152,901 was Andrew Jackson. So William H. Crawford is 4th, Henry Clay is 3rd, John Quincy Adams is second and Andrew Jackson is first in the popular vote. But we all know the popular vote doesn't do anything for you. So let's talk about how they finished in the electoral vote. Before we do that, you have to have a certain majority of electoral votes to win, and the magic number in this election was 131. So the winning candidate would have to have 131 electoral votes. So, now, let's talk about electoral votes. In fourth place, with 37 electoral votes, was Henry Clay. 37 electoral votes in fourth place, Henry Clay. In third place, with 41 electoral votes, was William H. Crawford. 41 electoral votes, William H. Crawford. In second place, with 84 votes, was John Quincy Adams. And in first place in the Electoral College was Andrew Jackson. The problem was he had 99 electoral votes, which means he doesn't have majority. Where does it go from here? We already had an election like this. It resulted in bad feelings. It goes to the House of Representatives. So because none of the four candidates have accumulated the necessary 131 votes to become president, according to the Constitution, the House of Representatives will decide. Also, according to this rule, only the top 3 vote getters in the Electoral College are eligible for vote upon by the House. So who's out? Henry Clay. So only the top 3 vote getters get to be in the running for the presidency. Now, it doesn't matter who had how many popular votes or electoral votes once it goes to the House. The House in this particular election is going to have 24 votes. And whoever gets the most votes is going to be president. Well, who's out, Laramie?
Who's out?
Who's out? Who's out of this thing? Who's not going to be considered?
Oh,
Henry Clay. Well, I remember something about this before, didn't we, in an election? What do you think Henry Clay did, being he was out? What? Well, kind of. What'd he do?
Used his political
He had a lot of...
position to sway their opinion.
To who? Absolutely. He's got a lot of friends and a lot of clout in the House. He's out of it. So he talks behind back doors and he tries to drum up support for John Quincy Adams. So when the House votes for president, in third place is Crawford with 4 electoral votes. In second place with 7 electoral votes is Jackson. And with 13 votes and the presidency, John Quincy Adams. And because of the vote in the House of Representatives, John Quincy Adams becomes the 6th president of the United States and appoints John C. Calhoun as his vice president. What do you think Andrew Jackson thinks about that? Here's a guy that won both the popular vote and the electoral vote. And because of shenanigans in his mind that go on behind the scenes in the House, he is robbed of the presidency. He believed that since he had originally been the largest amount of popular and electoral votes, he should have been president. Now, to make things worse, guess who new president John Quincy Adams appoints Secretary of State? Henry Clay. And remember, in history, so far, every single person that serves as Secretary of State eventually becomes president. And I mean to tell you, Jackson is on fire. He believes that John Quincy Adams, as part of a setup, so to speak, has now set his successor as the next president. He is so outraged, that being Jackson, that he calls the appointment of Henry Clay as Secretary of State as a corrupt bargain. He refers to it as a corrupt bargain, which is on your ID sheet. He sees this as the ripoff of the century. He is so mad at Henry Clay, he refers to him as the Judas of the West. The Judas of the West. And I'm telling you, you think Andrew Jackson was bitter? That isn't even the word for it. He was outraged that he had been cheated of his opportunity by a corrupt government that he came there to stop. Okay? That'll take us to our last subtopic, fairly short one, and that's the election of 1828. The election of 1828. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, from almost the day that he lost the election of 1824, Jackson spent every minute he had preparing for an election run in 1828. He was so mad that he wouldn't even refer to himself as a Republican. He started calling himself a Democratic Republican, which was later short to Democrats. And this is where the Democratic Party comes from. Okay? So he starts to refer to himself as a Democratic Republican. He calls Adams a National Republican. And that's where the Democratic Party comes into being. This will be the first election where you technically have the Democrats having a candidate. They're actually Democratic Republicans, but they're going to transform into a new political party known as the Democrats. It's kind of funny this morning, Josh Kelton, he kind of keeps up on his history. He says, Mr. Durr, that's not right. When we talk about the election of 1824, Jackson was a Democrat. I said, not yet. He's going to be in 1828. Okay, well anyway, the Republican Party is going to nominate John Quincy Adams for re-election, and the Democratic Republicans, or Democrats for short, are going to nominate Andrew Jackson. Now, I'm just going to be blunt with you here. Jackson's opponents ran an incredibly dirty campaign, nasty campaign against Jackson. I mean, really hit below the belt. And the two major concentrations of their dirty campaign is outwardly they called Jackson's wife Rachel an adulteress and a whore. Outright told the people that. Okay, they brought up that past. If you remember the video, they said this would come back to cause Jackson problems later. They even went farther, and this is what we talked about before. They referred to his mother as a prostitute and a whore. Emphasizing what? Remember? But remember?
And sleeping with a
British officer to get her sons out of that prison camp is what they insinuate. They were just awful to Jackson's family in this particular campaign. And obviously, continued attacks like this is going to take a toll on you. Not only you, but the people that are being accused. Well, his mother was dead, so she wasn't hearing any of this, but his wife sure was. And so was he. And he was absolutely furious. And despite the pressure and embarrassment, he forged on. Well, he got a break, because remember before when people immigrated in, they had to be here a certain amount of time to vote? Remember that rule? Well, by 1828, all white male citizens had the right to vote by that election. If you were a white male citizen, you had the right to vote. Now, what are most of these people? Common people. And who are they going to vote for? Jackson. Okay, because he's a common man. So these common people who made up a majority of the nation's population, who now had the right to vote, voted for Jackson, and he crushed Adams in this election, 178 electoral votes to just 83. So Jackson crushes the incumbent president, John Quincy Adams, 178 electoral votes to 83. And Jackson continues to have John C. Calhoun as his vice president, because Calhoun probably is on the fence of whether he's a Democratic Republican or a National Republican. He's still a Republican. And Jackson has him as his vice president. What comes after a few months after you're elected? Inauguration. Unfortunately for Jackson, on December 22nd, 1828, about 3 months before his inauguration, his wife Rachel dies of a heart attack. On December 22nd, 1838, his wife Rachel dies of a heart attack. He is in such grief, he seriously considers not going to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration and not taking over the presidency. He's that grief-stricken that he's considering not going, and he's considering not becoming president. What would change his mind? What would make him all of a sudden do a 180? Why would all of a sudden he say, "My God, I am..." Kind of. He got to thinking, and he said he blamed the Republican Party for killing his wife. Because of what they said and because of the stress they put her under, he believed in his heart that the Republican Party had killed his wife. And by God, rather than let him get away with it, he was going to go to Washington, D.C. and handle his political opponents his own way. So he's mad. And all of a sudden he goes from grief-stricken to mad, and he blames his political opponents in the Republican Party of killing his wife with the relentless assault on her character. Stresses her out. She has a heart attack and died. He then decides he will go to Washington and handle his opponents his own way. All right, let me tell you what we're going to do now. You're going to have a test on Friday. You're not going to be here Friday. You're going to need to take it before you go. We'll have a short review tomorrow. We're going to watch a 7-minute video on this election process that I talked about today. We'll give you the review. Test will be Friday. You will have 6 or 7 fill-in-the-blank questions and 3 short answer questions, and this essay, which is totally about the election of 1824. So I'm going to give you this to work on. Make sure you have this done by tomorrow so we can review it, because this essay will be on your test, and it won't be something we'll turn in like we did the last one. You will need to write it on paper. Now, how many people are not going to be here Friday? Okay, and where are you going Friday? I mean, okay, so when are you leaving Friday? That'd be a better question.
Early in the morning.
I mean, like 6 or 8 or 10 or what? Okay, well, you'll need to take this thing before you go. It's not very long. This is the major concentration right here. Okay, and if you have this thing figured out and written out, you'll be fine. Now, make sure that you understand that tomorrow we got a video, short video, and then a review. And the test will be Friday.